afternoon, everyone. I realise that I really am standing between you and your wine, so I'm going to be even briefer than the other speakers. I grew up being told that you should never make a decision when you're feeling emotional. But the reality is we all do make decisions when we're feeling emotional, and it's no different in the investment space. Big difference is that in investments there are only two main emotions that drive our decisions: greed and fear. With greed, we often land up being overconfident or overzealous, and we ignore the information available to us when we make decisions. And when we're feeling fearful, we're either paralyzed by the fear and do nothing, or we land up leaving a large amount of our wealth uninvested. We heard today from a lot of interesting speakers, all experts in their fields, about what affects behavior, how people think about choosing investments, and where the biases exist and things that we should try and avoid. So you've seen a lot of data. We're obviously an investment house and we spend a lot of time analysing data. So I want to share one last study with you. We ran a study of 17,600 investors in South Africa, invested across the Momentum Wealth platform. And of these investors over a 10-year period, there were a couple of things that came out that were very interesting. Firstly, a quarter of those investors actually destroyed value by switching between investments. In fact, they destroyed about 1% per annum of returns. Nearly 2/3 of those were chasing past performance when they switched. So they weren't doing it to try and get to an outcome. They were actually doing it because they thought that the performance another fund had given was better, and if they switched into it, they were again going to get that performance. You would have heard that that actually isn't true. In fact, quite the opposite is true if you heard Martinez's latest presentation. And during the market crash in 2008 and 9, half of these investors actually destroyed even more value. The other thing that came out of the study was that 64% of those switches were done for people chasing better returns. And I think you heard in Paul's presentation that you got 8 times the switch itch. In other words, people were 8 times more likely to switch when they were unhappy with their current performance. So that was quite interesting. It's not often that I find myself summarizing and thinking, sure, I'm over 40 and I'm actually really excited. I can't wait to get home and tell my husband that I don't have to floss or have water, but I can have 6 glasses of wine. And I can have coffee, yeah. So thanks to Michael for that. Jeanette introduced us all to the Momentum Investments way of thinking. She explained the concept of outcome-based investing, or OBI, that we keep referring to. And she also introduced how we think about risk. It was interesting that Derek and Paul built on that risk theme, and they added in the concept of a behavioral tax, and they spoke about the importance of staying invested. Herman then spoke us through his asset allocation views. He put out some various macroeconomic scenarios, and he gave us insights into how these would affect different asset classes. And most of us are in diversified portfolios, so I thought that was very interesting. Greg summarized Herman's 5 points by coming up with 3. He said there are 3 things you need to think about in investments: put your wealth to work, diversify, and then leave it alone. I loved his analogy to the story of Ulysses. I did make one observation, and that's that Ulysses' crew were obviously all auditory processes, because I'm not sure how beeswax would have stopped you from following the mermaids or the sirens if you were a visual learner like I am. Then we had a very interesting panel that Sonia chaired, and there we heard about the practices applied to the South African outcome-based solutions. It was great to hear about how investments have evolved, and there's so many different types and alternative asset classes we can invest in. Obviously for us as retail investors, we can't always access all of those. We're constrained by what's available on the various list platforms, but I'm hoping that in time we'll have access to unit trusts that give us a little bit more flexibility in our investment decisions. I particularly enjoyed listening to Eugene's way of constructing portfolios to be a little bit more robust and for outcomes specifically. And then in the final session, we obviously heard Pello talking through the opportunities within property Ian speaking about the fixed income world and how he thinks about investing in the environment. And we had Martin's putting together all the theoretical knowledge and actually putting it all together into a score that makes it easier for us to see what's right and wrong, or what gets a better tick or better score. As a practical person, I found myself sitting here and thinking, well, it's all really interesting, but how can I, as an investment consultant, or you guys as advisors, take all of this information and condense it into something that makes it more practical to keep your clients invested and create better outcomes, better financial outcomes for your clients? So I'm going to finish off by coming up with 3 bits of advice that I took today that I hope you can all apply in your practices. The first was based on what Greg said, that you want to narrow the gap between doing what's right and what's comfortable, and to protect yourself from your future self, that you should only make decisions within your own circle of competence and outsource the rest to the others. So I think if all of us stick to our circle of confidence, if we're an advisor, let's stick to giving advice. If we're an investment manager, let's stick to managing our portfolios. And let's find experts in other fields that can assist us in broadening our circle of confidence. The second bit of advice I'd argue is to pick a really good financial advisor. So partner with a good financial advisor. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the study by Furs and Hughes conducted in Canada, and a similar study conducted by the University of Pretoria. It basically took 15 years of household information, and it looked at the number of households that used advisors and households that used no financial advisors. And both studies came out with the exact same conclusion. Basically, your non-advised households over the 15-year period had an average savings rate of 4.3%, whereas your advised households had an average savings rate of 8.6%, double. So it speaks to why it's important to partner with a good financial advisor. And the last bit of advice that I certainly would apply is to make sure that I choose a portfolio where the outcome is aligned to my investor's outcome, because it makes it a lot easier to bridge that gap between investments and advice by doing that. And what I like about it is that we know it works. You've seen a lot of the evidence, so I'm going to finish off with 2 more pieces of evidence. That same study that I referred to earlier on the 17,600 investors, what we found is where they did switch and they went into a portfolio that was outcome based and that outcome was aligned to their particular individual outcome, actually they got about 70 basis points of additional performance. And if they were then able to do that and go one step further and avoid their biases in the portfolio, behavioral biases, they actually end up being about, on average, 1.4% better per annum. So we know outcome-based investing works. Thank you so much for joining us. I realize it's been a very long day, and we appreciate that you've stayed until the end. I think we've now come to the really interesting part of the evening, where we are going to combine some behavioral science with psychological experimentation and wine, and try and work out where those biases exist. I can't wait to find out how I can improve on my biases. I hope that you can too. But thank you for your time and for making the conference a success. We look forward to partnering with you, and please come and speak to any of us during the course of the evening. Thank you.